talk to us about Harwell. You're one of the longest residents of Harwell, I think. How long have you lived here?
83 years.
And how old are you?
83.
So where were you actually born? Physically, where were you born?
At Tudor Cottage. I can't remember who delivered me.
Yeah.
But what we were not clear about was, did we always have a district nurse who was a midwife in the village?
Right.
So we had Nurse Wood and Nurse Garside who lived in the nurse's bungalow at the top of the village.
Yep.
And
Yeah. Where was the nearest doctor?
Well, there were doctors in the village. Dr. Rice had a surgery at the Pollards.
Pollards?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So how many children do you have?
4.
Right. And grandchildren?
7. And I went to their house one day and I fell.
Uh-huh.
And they had concrete steps outside and I cut my forehead open badly here. And I can always remember Dr. Rice. I can clearly remember his hand shaking as he stitched me up.
Right.
My brother, one sister.
Older, younger?
My sister is 2 years younger. My brother is 13 years younger than me.
Right, right. So what were your parents doing at this time? Were they
farmers?
farmers?
Was a farmer.
Yeah.
Mother was a housewife.
What kind of stuff did you grow on the farm? What was?
It was arable, livestock, cattle, and cherries.
And cherries.
Cherries were a very important
Yes.
part of the farm.
Yes.
Well,
Sure?
in my memory, originally, the orchards were always auctioned, and the auction took place at the cherry auction at the Crown. You got the sale catalogues going up to 1955,
right. Yeah.
and the details of the people that bought the orchards.
Yeah.
So
they would come and buy the whole orchard,
yes.
the produce of the whole orchard,
yes.
and then it was up to them to pick them?
Yeah, they brought with their own staffing.
Right.
And there were there was one family that used to come from Kent in the old days, because Kent is famous for cherries, but Harwell cherries were also really tops. They had employed bird scarers who were local, and they're from crack of dawn till.
And how did they scare the birds?
With guns.
Guns, yeah.
We didn't have bangers in those days.
Yeah.
And we used to use muzzleloader guns. We used to fill them up with powder and ram them in and put shot in as well. If you wanted to make a lot of noise, you just put the powder in on a wad. But a young friend of mine was killed bird scaring because he overrammed a muzzleloader and it blew up in his face. Small farms, there were about 5.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And were they all similar in what they did? Or
mostly, yes. There was cherry orchards at Princeton Manor Farm, here, and at Middle Farm.
Yes.
They were the principal ones.
Yeah.
And that was the Bosley family.
Yes.
At the Middle Farm.
Yeah.
Gordon Bosley was quite famous for his cherries.
Yes. Yeah.
And he actually named a few varieties, one of them after his daughter.
What sort of things did you do? I mean, were you confined to your garden the way kids are now, or were you all over the place?
To be on the farm, and we used to help with harvesting, ride around on horse and carts, and then eventually on tractors and things that you would never be allowed to do now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were all over the place. There was freedom.
Yes. Yeah.
The children were brought up to be seen but not heard, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we had visitors in the old days.
Yeah.
We used to be kept out of sight and used to come in and say good evening to them.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was it. We're gone.
Yeah.
And somebody was there looking after us.
Who did look after you?
Well, Miss Buckle.
Right.
Now, can I tell you a little story about that?
Yeah.
When we were small, Barbara and I, my sister and I, were in the upstairs bedroom at Tudor Cottage, overlooking the road. I've told you this before.
No.
And one day, a Foden steam lorry came roaring up the hill, and you can imagine what a mess they made. Smoke. And anyway, the ashes from the stack ignited the bedroom windows. it would be curtains. And if this last buckle hadn't been with her, probably the house would have burnt down. I went to the village school. In the old days, it was Mr. Lanning, who was the headmaster.
Where was the school then?
Down School Lane.
School Lane.
In 1937, I went to Abingdon School.
Did
Wearing short trousers.
So did they have to discipline you a lot in those
school,
classes? I mean, did they?
Yeah, I think so. Oh yeah.
I mean, now of course you're not allowed to.
Well, we used to it having a school.
Yes.
If you were a naughty boy, you went to the headmaster and he beat you.
In school. How long did you stay in school?
Two. I left school.
Right.
And then I came back. I wanted to join the RAF. I wasn't allowed to.
Because?
And they made me. They said it was more important that I stayed here and farmed, helping on the farm in school holidays. Yeah. And do you know, I can remember the workmen, how broad their language was, and I couldn't understand them.
Right.
And it took a long time to learn the phrases that they were using, like forward and come here and and they were all very, very broad Berkshire.
Right.
I'm Berkshire born and Berkshire bred, thick in the arm and thick in the head.
So you said during the war you had land girls come and work on the farm?
Yes,
yeah.
And prisoners of war.
Did you?
Yes, we had Italians. They had a camp at Blueberry, to which they came to every day, and the Land Army were at Blueberry as well. Joan Freud, who's just died, was a land girl in the camp at Blueberry. In the old days we had a staff of at least 3 or 4 men, and a carter with horses in the stable. I seem to remember, in my memory, at least 4 horses, but I think in the older days there was even 8.
Yeah.
Early days, all the land was ridge and furrowed. Do you know what that means?
Yeah.
Well, it was ploughed so that your plough inverts the soil one way, and you inverted it from the other side, so that it went to a peak. If you like. And you ploughed until you came to the bottom of the furrow, and that was always left open for drainage. And all the fields were ridge and furrow. And when we brought in tractors, it was a pain. You really couldn't cope. So that was one thing about tractors. And when we had the first tractors, they were clumsy and unwieldy, and with trailer ploughs, you had to have a fairly large, wide headland for them to turn on, and that meant that very often after
they tip over sometimes.
No, after a bit, the headland became higher than the furrows were, so we had a drainage problem.
The farms in the village at the time. How many were there
There
altogether?
were small farms. There were about 5.
Right.
Yeah.
And were they all similar in what they did? Or I mean,
mostly, yes. There was cherry orchards at Princess Manor Farm, here, and at Middle Farm.
Yes.
They were the principal ones.
Yeah.
And that was the Bosley family.
Yes.
At Middle Farm.
Yeah.
Gordon Bosley was a...
there was a village fire engine.
Yes.
Yes.
That
Tell
was
me about that.
Just as you're going into Wells Head, on the right hand side there's a grass verge, isn't there, in front of their cottage. Well, it was in a building there, and it was hand drawn. I can never actually remember it being used. We had about 5 shops in the village.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about
We
that.
had 1, 2, 3 public houses. We had a carter, a Coleman, they were King brothers, lived down in the lanes, and we had 3 bakers. 3 bakers.
3 bakers.
Yeah.
You told me a little story about the baker delivering the bread.
Oh yeah, that was Frankie Mitchell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell me about that again.
Well, he was a real character, and he never walked anywhere. He used to run, and he'd come round with his basket, run up the drive, and then dash in and run.
Right.
And very often he was entertained on his rounds. And this is absolutely true. I can remember him dancing on the kitchen table. The children at school originally used to have for lunch, they took their own lunch to school. They used to go to the butcher's and had a chunk of bread, and they used to get lard spread on it for them by the butcher, and that was their lunch. We used to have, of course, early in the war we used to have free milk and fruit.
So that's interesting because thinking back at those times, what was there for the really poor families? I mean, if
they were poor, and some of them just didn't have any shoes. A lot of men in the village used to keep ferrets, and their staple diet was rabbit. They used to go around ferreting.
Yes.
A lot of them, and the odd pheasant they could poach.
Yes.
We had a small ration of butter, and it was allocated to everybody. I can remember rancid butter. It was awful.
So how did you keep things cold?
We didn't have cellars. We had a cellar. We didn't have refrigerators.
Things. Do you think the village has changed a lot in your lifetime?
Yes. Well, yes. I think people now are better off, aren't they? And the young men used to stand on the village corner, and they didn't get into mischief quite so much. There wasn't so much hooliganism as there is today. We never locked any doors. People didn't. They trusted people. Today you couldn't trust anybody. I learned to fly initially from a strip at Reading, and then thereafter at Blackbush, and then we moved to Booker, which you know, Wickham Park, and formed a syndicate with that, which is Golf Alpha November Foxtrot Mike, which is quite a famous aeroplane. I first flew in 1966. I collected enough spares and bought remains of a crashed tiger moth. That was in 1985.
Right.
In the latter days, it was where the co-op was, on the left-hand side, just opposite the bus stop.
Right.
Which is now, and it was originally Pryor's shop with a bakery at the back. And I can remember the baker there was always wearing a cap, always covered in flour. That's the shop. She used to sell everything you could think of. And she used to barricade the door so only one person could get in at a time, because she used to get things lifted. There was Aidan Powell's, the butcher shop. There was Frankie Mitchell's and Mrs. Mitchell's shop. He was a baker as well, and she sold all sorts of things. There was a village store which was a general store, which in latter days Mr. and Mrs. Wickens used to.
Oh, I know that. Yes, they were still there when I came. The hairdresser.
And that was converted into
a house.
And then there was Dunn's, the butcher shop, nearly opposite. And in Wells Head there was a little shop.
Jackie Pryor.
I can tell you a little story about that. When we were small, I don't know how small, we always used to go around to Bob and Kitty's at Princess Manor Farm, because we half lived there. They made a fuss of us. And we went to the little shop and bought some fireworks illegally. We could do that in those days. And had them stuffed up inside my jumper. I just saw it. Went to Bob and Kitty's, and you can guess what happened, can't you? She produced some sparklers, and we were running around on the lawn. I can remember this as clearly as anything. And it ignited this rocket under my shoulder, and it went off last month. In the old farming in the old days, we had still got a yard down the bottom. There was a mud wall, thatched mud wall all around. There were mud walls everywhere in the village. There were only very few left.
Very few left.
There's one at the top of Princess Manor. This is in the yard. There were raised areas that was on sort of chalk based, and we used to build all the ricks on Arthur Hine. And I was never allowed to build a rick, but I always wanted to.